America and other free and open societies face crucial challenges and opportunities abroad that affect security and prosperity at home. This is a series of conversations with guests who bring deep understanding of today's battlegrounds and creative ideas about how to compete, overcome challenges, capitalize on opportunities, and secure a better future. I am H.R. McMaster. This is Battlegrounds.
On today's episode of Battlegrounds, our focus is on the country of Jordan, a critical U.S. partner in the Middle East. This past year, Jordan marked its centennial, demonstrating a century of resilience and stability. Our guest, His Majesty King Abdullah II of Jordan, is the longest-serving Arab leader currently in office. He assumed power from his father, King Hussein, in 1999, following a distinguished military career. He is head of the Hashemite dynasty and a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Located in the heart of the Middle East, Jordan has a history rooted in diversity, tolerance, and moderation, with a legacy of being a safe haven to millions. The banks of the River Jordan are the crossroads of the Fertile Crescent, the birthplace of human civilization and the world's three monotheistic faiths. The Ottomans ruled the region from 1516 until the end of World War I, when the Ottoman Empire fell after the Great Arab Revolt, which was led by King Abdullah II's great-great-grandfather, Sharif Hussein bin Ali. The fallen Ottoman Empire was partitioned into British and French mandates under the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The Emirate of Transjordan was established in 1921 as a Hashemite-ruled state under the British Mandate covering the lands to the east of the Jordan River. Jordan gained full independence with the establishment of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan in 1946, and King Abdullah I became the founding ruler of Jordan. Despite regional turbulence and economic challenges, Jordan remains a trusted partner to the United States, which may explain why King Abdullah was the first Arab leader to be hosted by President Biden at the White House last year. Jordan has a historic political, economic, security, and military partnership with the United States that has flourished under mutual interests. As monarch, King Abdullah initiated economic liberalization, promoted intra- and interfaith harmony and peace around the world, and founded the 2015 Aqaba Process initiative to enhance regional and international coordination to counter terrorism and extremism. While regional powerhouses struggled to stay afloat during infighting and political shifts, Jordan stayed steadfast to its values and principles. Jordan welcomed an influx of Syrian refugees with open arms, setting a model for the world and a paradigm shift by carrying out a global public good. Jordan continues to work and coordinate with the U.S. on many other regional and global concerns in pursuit of regional peace, especially between the Palestinians and the Israelis. More recently, King Abdullah has rallied regional leaders to act together to improve energy and food security in the midst of supply chain disruptions associated with the repercussions of the pandemic and a number of international developments. We welcome King Abdullah II of Jordan to discuss the Jordan-U.S. relationship, Jordan's role in overcoming regional socioeconomic, diplomatic, and security challenges, and what more can be done to resolve conflicts, stabilize the Middle East, and improve the lives of people in a region that has been rife with violence and suffering for too long.
Your Majesty, welcome to Battlegrounds. What an honor it is to host you, and I know our audience is going to love hearing your thoughts and your perspective.
My dear friend, the honor is mine. I'm glad to see you again, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you. I thought we might just dive right into it because our time is limited and there's a lot to cover. You know, you're here in Washington, and of course, the Jordanian-U.S. relationship is a special relationship. Jordan's a country that has always had a broad regional perspective and helped all of us understand the dynamics in the greater Middle East. And of course, as we look at the region today, it looks pretty tough, right, in terms of ongoing violence, what I call this fitna, or this sectarian civil war, the cycle of sectarian violence that we see in Yemen and in Syria. Of course, you're hosting so many refugees in Jordan as a result of the Syrian civil war. Might you just share with our viewers your perspective on the broader dynamics in the Middle East and what your expectations are for the U.S.-Jordanian relationship going forward?
Well, I mean, our relationship is a very old historic one. My father met Eisenhower as his first presidential contact. And so this is an institutional relationship, not only with consecutive administrations, but with your military, your intelligence, with Congress. And it's a very strong one. I think it's probably one of the strongest in the region, especially based on trust. And as you said, we live in a difficult neighborhood, and time has shown Jordanians and Americans standing, unfortunately, shoulder to shoulder in different conflict zones. But I'm very proud of that the relationship that we have between our two countries. Obviously, most days are not good days in our part of the world, and we all, I believe, do the best that we can to look at the glass half full and to move the process forward. At the moment, as you alluded to, the challenges in Yemen. We're very worried about the humanitarian disaster in Lebanon. 2 years of COVID, ISIS has reemerged, whether it's in Syria or in Iraq. We talked yesterday briefly about reemergence of them around the world, including Africa. So our visit here to the United States is, again, to coordinate with our friends and to see what we can do to look at the tactical and the strategic map of 2022 and how do we build that teamwork and coalition between many of us to sort of ease the suffering that the people are having in the region.
Well, Your Majesty, you've often convened countries across the region within the GC, but beyond the GCC. Jordan is a center for military cooperation. You're a military officer and have a strong cavalry background, which I admire greatly. And I just wondered, what is your vision for joint Arab action going forward? And I know that you've convened a number of groups to isolate jihadist terrorists, for example, from sources of ideological support under the Aqaba Process. Yes. But might you share with our viewers Jordan's role in the region and what your vision is for joint Arab action?
Well, there has been joint Arab action. There's also tremendous cooperation between Jordan and NATO. This is where we in the United States have worked a lot. Under UN umbrellas over many decades, peacekeeping forces all over the world. More recently, obviously, is a coordination between Arab countries against the ISIS threat. And again, you've got to look at the region to see where they are. Syria and Iraq are main battlegrounds for us. That means that they're on our borders. We have conflict on a fairly regular basis with them. But as I think the British vernacular, we have to look at the world, what they call ink spots. So it's the holistic approach of being able to chew gum and walk at the same time and look at the whole globe. We can't concentrate 1 year on Syria, the next year on Iraq, and then ignore Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram in Africa, the challenges that we see in the Philippines with terrorism, and if that links into Indonesia, de-radicalization in Europe, the Balkans. We've just been asked under the Aqaba Process to, and again, 2 years of COVID delayed that, but the new task force for our Aqaba Process, which brings in the South American countries and Latin American countries. So we all are working together on a global approach to make sure that we can, as you said, as I said, chew gum and walk at the same time with these issues.
Well, Your Majesty, I think it's such an important vision because our enemies are networked. We have needed a network solution. Exactly. I think it's quite clear. So I wonder if we might talk about an even more vexing problem maybe, and this is the Israeli-Palestinian issue. You visited Ramallah this year, I think for the first time to the Palestinian Authority. There's increasing discussion about maybe lack of confidence among those who had confidence before in the ability to make some progress toward a two-state solution. What is your vision for the Israeli-Palestinian issue, especially in the wake of the recent violence we've seen?
Well, you know, I think being soldiers, we all learn never to give up. And so it's no excuse to have issues and then ignore them. I do believe that, and this is not just in our region, but the world, 2 years of COVID, people are frustrated and fed up. Right. And with the difficulties for social economic problems, compounded with food security issues that you and I had talked about before, that's going to only get worse with the Russian-Ukrainian issue. A lot of leaders that I've been talking to recently have woken up to the fact that we need to fix our own problems. There is always the easy way out that, the United States will come in and solve all our issues. And many of us have always said, we need to do the heavy lifting on behalf of the United States. But, talk the talk, unfortunately. What I see in the past several months is Arab leaders coming together and saying, how can we chart a new vision for our region? And it's not just the Arab Peninsula. We're also looking, obviously, at Iraq, which you have a lot of experience there. They are a vital part of the future of the Arab world. And how do we connect with the Iraqis? How do we solve, as you said, the Israeli-Palestinian issue? Because no matter what relations Arab countries have with Israel, if we don't solve the Palestinian issue, it's really 2 steps forward and 2 steps back, as far as I'm concerned. So we're all working, knowing that the last month was a difficult month. We had Ramadan, Passover, and Easter holidays. But can we afford to go through this again next year? Right. And so I hope that the dust will settle in the next couple of weeks. And then how do we get Israelis and Palestinians to the table? Yeah. Not because of politics, but again, because of dire social economic challenges coming out of COVID and compounded now with Ukraine and Russia.
And just making progress on these issues could unleash some tremendous potential, I think, in the region. We're talking about problems, and I have more problems on the slate here to discuss, but could you maybe talk about your vision for economic integration in the region and an opportunity to take advantage of the great promise in terms of the region's resources, and those resources primarily being the very young population in the Middle East?
So, absolutely. My discussions in Ramallah, and I've been there several times, and discussion with the Israeli leadership is, obviously we believe in a 2-state solution, and I think that's the only solution that allows Israel's integration into the Middle East is when we solve the issues for the Palestinians. Food security, unemployment, poverty is an issue not just between Israelis and Palestinians and Jordan, but further afield. And if you look at Africa, the challenges that they're going to have, we all need to come together in these new resilience pacts to be able to help each other. And so I think the economy, I hope, overshadows political limitations. And how do we break barriers down? Everybody around the world, at the end of the day, the vast majority want a better life. Right. They want to be able to make sure that their families are secure and that they can move forward with hope. But it comes down to us as leaders providing that narrative to the people so that they can buy into it.
You know, Your Majesty, one of the purposes of this program, this series, is to help people understand better how they can help build a better future. And when I think of you and Jordan has a positive vision for the future. There are others in the region who do not, and I would put the Iranians at the top of that list, and especially how Iran has continued to foment this cycle of sectarian conflict in a way that I think keeps the Arab world enmeshed in conflict and violence. From Yemen to Syria, you've borne the brunt of much of the Syrian civil war with the refugees that you're hosting in Jordan. What are your thoughts about how to approach the problem of Iran and the continued effort to export the revolution, to threaten Israel through proxy forces and to threaten others in the region? Mustafa al-Kadhimi, our friend, right, who was attacked in a drone attack several times. What can be done about the Iranian problem?
I think that is happening on multiple avenues. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is reaching out to the Iranians. Gulf countries have dialogue. I'm not too sure how tactical or strategic from the Iranian point of view that is. Obviously, we want everybody to be part of a new Middle East and a move forward. But we do have security challenges. We're seeing border attacks on a regular basis, and we know who's behind that. One of the issues that we're studying at this point, whether people like to hear this or not, the presence of the Russians in the south, in Syria, was a source of calm because they were making sure that we could deconflict. And if you remember correctly, there was a deconfliction center between the United States and Russia in Jordan to make sure that more good days and bad days. That vacuum will be filled by the Iranians and their proxies. So unfortunately, we're looking at maybe an escalation of problems on our borders. Mm-hmm. So do the politics, the negotiations that are going on between Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, the United States, does that move Iran into a more positive light? I hope so. I'm not seeing it on the ground at the moment.
Your Majesty, you mentioned Russia, and of course, I think some countries in the region have seen Russia as a way to hedge against the U.S. professed imminent disengagement from the region, right? We keep saying we're leaving the Middle East, and I think that has created a tendency on the part of maybe even Jordan, but certainly the Israelis, to hedge with the Russians. But of course, now with this brutal attack on Ukraine, it's tough to be sympathetic to the Russians, I think, from my perspective anyway. What are your thoughts broadly on how Russia's war against Ukraine, the renewed invasion of Ukraine, has affected the Middle East?
Different countries will look at it in slightly different ways. I mean, from the Jordanian perspective, the Russians are on our border in Syria. And so that is part of our calculation. The Russians play a role in the quartet, the peace process between the Israelis and Palestinians. So they are active international players. And again, it'll be very interesting to see post-Ukraine, if we can put it that way, where the Russians are in Syria. They were, I think, the predominant force. I know that now that gap is being filled by the Iranians. That quite possibly will create more insecurities in the region, so that's something that we have to look at. You touched on a very important point where there is this feeling of America pivoting away from the Middle East. A lot of countries have trade relationships with Russia and China, as they do with many countries around the world. That's I think, pretty normal. But I think the military long-term alliance is always with the West. Do leaders feel that America is turning its back? That is a narrative that is out there.
And I think you're talking about the Emiratis, the Saudis.
So I think the Emiratis are being put unfairly into a box on that. Again, this is a nation that has spent 30 years in 6 campaigns fighting side by side with the United States.
I mean, with great courage and
with
distinction.
Great courage and great capabilities.
In Afghanistan in particular.
Exactly. And so I don't see that as an issue. But again, I think from an Emirati perspective, you've got to understand that this is a very capable, wealthy country that has investments all over the world. So sometimes I think they're thrown into a corner with a lack of understanding of that relationship. I know the leadership there. I know their long-term relationship with the West. And quite honestly, having been in Europe after the start of the war between Ukraine and Russia, I put it to you that we have a stronger Europe emerging and a stronger European-American relationship emerging. So if anybody thinks that you guys are out of it, you're back in the game big time, I think. And people have to understand that. And I think that's a positive thing on many of the issues that we have discussed.
Your Majesty, of course, one of the big grievances for the Emiratis is the Houthi rebels and their connection to Iran and the U.S. decision not to designate the Houthis any longer as a terrorist organization. I think this bothers them. But I think the overall point, and I'd love for you to just expound on this, is that important competitions, global competitions, play out in the Middle East, which is one of the reasons it doesn't make sense to pivot away from a region and then, of course, maybe cede influence and strategic advantage to Russia and China as well. Could you maybe share some thoughts on how competitions with these maybe revanchist powers on the Eurasian landmass are playing out in the Middle East?
Well, I mean, I think you see that competition globally. That's part of human nature. And I think part of the problems that I've seen in my own little way over the past several decades, when people don't talk to each other, misunderstandings increase. So again, I remember going back to when we had a 24/7 deconfliction center in Jordan, sort of with our umbrella, but with Russians and Americans meeting on a regular basis to make sure that there's deconfliction in Syria. When you guys were talking, that was a good thing from my perspective, because a lot of misunderstandings were put to the side. Obviously, looking at the global issues now, I think there has to be a reset when things calm down. I think there's more of a European, to an extent, American history in our area than there is. The Russian history is somewhat newer from the Cold War. Right. But I think when we look over centuries and maybe sort of more modern history, the channels of connectivity and culture are more Europe, Western-centric.
Your Majesty, there is the skepticism these days about really any sustained American activities, even abroad, military or just other forms of engagement, and there seems to be sort of a new kind of almost isolationist sentiment, and the Middle East is usually the region most talked about. And I'd just like to give you the opportunity, if you wouldn't mind explaining to our viewers, why should Americans care about what's happening in the Middle East, and how can America play a productive role in building a better future for the people in the region, but also for people here in the United States?
I mean, look, I think there's a realism of understanding that different countries have the right to have priorities. The United States, over the past couple of years, is looking at domestic issues. China was a subject we kept on hearing. I think the Russian-Ukrainian situation, again, brings a new focus. What I've said consistently to American presidents is that you could ignore the Middle East at your peril, because it'll come back and give you a swift kick up the backside if you're not careful. But as I see the new the desire to re-engage by Arab countries to solve the Israeli-Palestinian issue, to move the regional relationship better, part of it because of the challenges that Iran poses, I think this is the right time for America to engage in our part of the world. Having said that, as I said earlier, it is up to us to do the heavy lifting. And this maybe, I don't want to say laziness, but this America can do everything. And that's not fair. So you will see Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, Egypt, some of the other Gulf countries really coming together to try and chart a vision for people and have that coordination. And then we go to the United States and say, can you help push us across the finish line?
Your Majesty, you've been really generous with your time. I'd like to just offer you for any concluding comments, anything you'd like to leave our viewers with.
Not at all. I mean, I think, thank you very much for this opportunity. We're here in the United States to thank the administration, the Congress, and the American people for the tremendous support we've always gotten for the United States. Again, when you looked at our refugee challenges, we have 35% of our country is refugees. That's about 110 million people compared to the United States figures that came in a very short period of time. And if it wasn't for your support to our country to get us through that, I don't know where we'd be. And again, the tremendous relationship we have between our militaries. I mean, we're all very, very proud that Jordanians and Americans stand shoulder to shoulder, not just on our borders, but in many places around the world. And that's only going to continue, and it's something I'm very proud of.
Your Majesty, on behalf of the Hoover Institution, thank you so much for spending time with us and providing your insights and wisdom and perspective on the Middle East and why it should matter to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
Pleasure.
Battlegrounds is a production of the Hoover Institution, where we advance ideas that define a free society. For more information about our work, to hear more of our podcasts, or view our video content, please visit hoover.org.